Right Path to Retirement. Yep. Your podcast here that's going to lead you right through retirement is back on here. I'm your co-host, Doug Turnbull, with financial advisor and the main man, the big host, Jimmy Lynn there out of Las Vegas, who is a financial advisor, as I said, at Right Path to Retirement. And get in touch with him and his team at rightpath2retirement.com or call him 702-805-7000. Jimmy, I hope you're doing well this fall season.
I am doing great, Doug. This is the best time of year in Las Vegas. We just entered the 70s, and so I think for the next 6 months, this is the best place to live in the country.
And we're here in Atlanta where things get really hot and humid in the summer. And now Vegas, you have a much higher temperature, but maybe less humidity. But you look forward to fall. But see, yours is the 70s. We start getting the 60s and 50s Fahrenheit, and I get nervous. I mean, I'm wearing my first hoodie of the season today, and I'm already wishing it was summer again and the pool's open. So it sounds very comfortable there in Vegas. Do y'all have a lot of fall festivals or things like that? That's a big thing around here.
Yeah, it starts popping up everywhere. I think there's a Renaissance festival going on this weekend. I've never been too into that, but they have a lot of commercials about that. A lot of nice farmers markets all around, and art festivals, food festivals, which I love. That's kind of my cup of tea, is the food festivals.
Food festivals.
Yeah, I like that. But yeah, no, it's just the energy level rises in Las Vegas during this time of year. F1 is coming soon. It's not the most popular thing in Vegas because the traffic is horrendous.
Yeah, that's going to be in November.
That correct. Yep. So it's a lot of energy here.
Okay, so I can spend the whole time because I'm a big racing enthusiast. In fact, by the time people hear this, the NASCAR weekend will have already come and gone. We're recording right before the NASCAR weekend, and it's just 4 races to go in NASCAR season there. So I think that's a bigger deal than the Las Vegas Grand Prix, but I know that's a big one. They have to actually close the strip down and race in the middle of the night and then reopen it, which is crazy to me that you have to race at basically 2 and 3 a.m. to make it all get pulled off. But that's wild. But Jimmy, we're going to now I am sure here's your cheesy transition. Are you ready? F1 drivers that are all making, 20 to 50 million a year or something just obscene compared to us yeomen here. I'm sure their financial planners have a whale of a time doing estate planning. All right, there's see that? I'd love to see what Lewis Hamilton's required minimum distributions are when he turns 73 years old. But hey, no. But we're going to talk. Last episode was RMDs. This time it's estate planning, and you're especially acute at getting through the tax efficiency portion of this stuff as well. But if I were just to come in and I was a little bit older and ready to plan for this estate planning, I'm pressing go, Jimmy Lynn. What do you ask people?
Well, with estate planning, I mean, it's just an important piece of an overall retirement plan. And that's really what we try to provide for our clients is holistic planning. You go to some of these big, shiny advisors where they're in these high-rise buildings, and all they typically will talk to you about are investments and promising you returns that you want to hear. That's really just one piece of a holistic plan. And one of the most important pieces that I see missing is estate planning. So every time we meet with clients, I would say 75% of the prospects we meet with just simply don't have an estate plan. And that's just leaving a huge hole in your retirement plan and exposing you to a lot of different consequences. So this is something we talked about off air, Doug. We could spend 4 hours on this. Right?
Yeah.
So we are going to try to condense this to the next, 8 to 10 minutes and give all the listeners something that they can, start thinking about and considering in their personal situation. Yeah,
I was going to ask just because when I hear estate, I think estate sale or, real estate. And I started thinking of a physical thing like, I'm the Doug estate is, but what is estate planning? Because that is just a section of retirement planning, right? So what is that phase?
So estate planning, exactly kind of what you described it as, it's always been looked at as something that, for the wealthy, right? It's something really sophisticated that most commoners don't need to do. And that's couldn't be further from the case. But most people start off with oftentimes just thinking that they need a will. And a will, from the traditional sense is just basically your wishes, as far as, your end of life wishes, as well as guardianship, and who am I going to give my assets to. And that's what most people start with as a base level for their estate planning. But unfortunately, they start there and they end there. And the biggest problem with that is probate. If you simply have a will, legally, that will doesn't just go into effect. They don't just say, okay, we got this will, so your kids are going to get the house, and your car is going to go to your brother. What happens is a court has to verify that document is legal. They have to make sure that creditors aren't owed anything before they start distributing these things. It could be a 12 to 18 month process. And it's been reported that it could eat up maybe 15 to 20% of the estate value that you have through court fees. So it's a huge problem. And again, that's where most people start and end their estate plan. Really, the way we look at estate planning, it's much larger than that. So essentially, we'll break it down to 4 documents that an estate plan typically will include. It's going to include a trust. It's going to include that will that we talked about, but it's also going to include a financial power of attorney and a medical directive. So those are really the 4 big components of an estate plan. And the purpose of all these is really a couple things. It's really for you to avoid probate, to maintain control of your assets and the way you want to distribute it, upon your passing, and even how you want to distribute it as far as timing. Make sure all your wishes are followed, provide you a level of privacy, and then also have an advocate for yourself while you're living or incapacitated as far as your financial matters as well as your medical matters. So we'll kind of break those all down in bits and pieces so people can kind of digest this. But
I don't even know what the difference between a will and a trust is, so I'm ready for it.
And no, absolutely. And then we'll kind of break that down because you're not alone. I would say the great majority of the population don't really know the difference. But essentially, that will kind of the way described is a way where people thought they could pass on their assets, but unknowingly, all of that has to go through probate. There's a cost for that. There's a time for that, and it may not actually follow the will if a judge who's never met you and doesn't know you may make decisions as far as what they think is appropriate, and it could be against what your will states. So really, a trust is a legal document that is basically going to have its own entity, and you will fund the trust. So if you have a home, for example, you could put the trust as the owner of that home, and any other assets that you put into that trust, it's now owned by the trust, but you can direct as the trustee how you want it distributed. So you can say the home is going to go to my kids to split. We have certain funds that are going to go maybe to the grandkids for college, or you want to pass on assets to your kids during specific ages. So you can start controlling from the grave, essentially, how you want all the hard-earned money that you've saved over the years. You don't want to just squander it, and you don't want a judge to decide where it's going to go. You want to be the decision maker. And that's what the trust allows, because anything that's put in the trust, it avoids probate. So now a judge is not going to have to make any decisions on that. You're not going to have to pay the cost. You're not going to have that waiting period. So that's the importance of the trust in order to kind of help manage those affairs. Now, a will is still important, and a will becomes part of the trust. Because if you want things like guardianship, if you have young children, you need to determine who's going to be their guardian. Those are things that you want in the will. End of life decisions, like if you wanted to be taken off life support or you wanted to donate your organs, those are things that are going to be in the will. And also there's something called a pour over will, which essentially is anything that you missed out on putting into the trust. So if you have any assets that were not put into the trust, then it'll be put into the trust through your pour over will. So all your remaining assets go into the trust. So essentially what we're doing is we're avoiding probate, and then we're passing on our assets or distributing them through the trust. The trust document is super important. And so that's the foundation of the trust. The will is a complementary piece for the reasons that we talked about as far as the pour over, guardianship, and end of life decisions. But One of the most important reasons I make sure that all of my clients have their estate planning is really the things that people don't think about, which is the financial power of attorney and medical directives, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're incapacitated, I mean, a few years ago, we had a pandemic where people were on ventilators. Who makes the decisions as far as what's going to happen with your condition? How do people get shared information here? There's a lot of privacy issues with sharing medical information. And so if you have a medical directive and you have permission, you give somebody permission, say it's your spouse or a sibling, and they can help make decisions for you because the physician is allowed to share information with them. That's really important. But if you don't have that type of document in place, then you don't have anybody that's advocating for your healthcare. Right. So,
Yeah. Do people just come up with people in their lives, or particularly this financial power of attorney one? Do people just have a trusted person in their life that they choose for that? Or is that something that they actually come to their financial advisor for?
well, I recommend that you should have somebody trust in your life because much like the medical directive, the financial power of attorney, that's going to allow somebody to handle your financial affairs while, if you're incapacitated, right? So if you're in a coma and you have all these financial matters, you're racking up bills, it could really hinder your credit. And just, you can create a lot of different penalties. So you want to have a trusted advisor. If it's a child of yours, if it's your spouse, if it's some type of family member, your best friend, you do want some type of trusted person that can help you with your financial matters. And you could have it set it up a couple of different ways. It could be effective immediately, where we have somebody that can help on your financial matters right away, or you can wait until you're incapacitated. That way they don't have access to do things financially for you, but in a time of need, they can fill your shoes and step in for those solutions. But those are the 4 core pieces I would have people look into right away, making sure they have that trust, that will, and most importantly to me, the power of attorney and the medical directives, because that's the foundational level of having a basic plan so that you're in control instead of having a judge that you've never met making all of these decisions for you and causing infighting within your family.
Yeah. And that's the last thing. Your family's already going through this terrible loss, right? And then it's going to that should bring people together, but this stuff could drive them right apart. Would you, and I'm not asking for a specific example here, really more in the hypothetical, but in your years of experience, and you've been doing this, a long time, since the mid 2000s, what is maybe the most common overarching mistake you see, either that's been made and the person's died, or they come in with an idea of something and then you help steer them around that?
Well, I'll give you 2 examples. The first is the most important is that I would say the great majority of the people that come in do not have anything in place. Yeah. And so that's a huge mistake. No medical directive, no power of attorneys. And so if you have a married couple and neither of them could help the other in financial matters and medical matters if the other is incapacitated. So that's the first mistake.
Tough. Yeah.
But in a real life example with one of my clients, what I've seen is that, a married couple came up and we helped assist them in getting their legal documents set up. Now, I want to clarify, I'm not an attorney, but in some capacity, we can help set up some documents. And we also have referral partners with attorneys in town. But we help them get it set up. And the importance of that is years later, the husband had essentially a degenerative disease where his mental capacities weren't there, but he had a large portion of what they were living off of in his IRA. And just the fact that we had those documents set up allowed her to basically be able to access the funds to help continue to support the household. And without something like that, it could, depending on if he was incapacitated for a long period of time, she wouldn't have access to any funds to pay the bills. So just a situation like that can change someone's life.
That's so big, and you got to think of it. I get nervous just thinking about if something happened to me or my wife and not knowing the passwords for stuff, all right, much less access to funds. So that's a really big thing. And Jimmy, like you said, you're not the attorney, but you can help them get on the right path. And I was not trying to do the pun, but certainly to saying, here's the document you need. Maybe here's the person or type of person you need to see, or here's someone in your life you need to consider to help get roped in on this to get them going in the right direction. Well, there's so many things to unpack. That could be, like you said, a 3 or 4 hour conversation. That's why if you have questions about this, be sure and send the link for this to somebody. Make sure they're thinking about too, someone you care about. And of course, we want you to subscribe on Apple and Spotify to this podcast, but other questions too. RightPathToRetirement.com. Complimentary consultation right there. Jimmy, I know you do seminars, live events, but you also talk to people a bunch one-on-one to try to steer them through what could be, if you're unprepared, a minefield of retirement.
100%. Like I always say, taxes are the number one topic, but I would say estate planning is right behind it. So
and I have a feeling those go hand in hand, Jimmy. So we talked a bunch about taxes on the last episode too, about required minimum distribution. So again, go to rightpathtoretirement.com. Dial up Jimmy there in his Vegas office or thereabouts, 702-805-7000, and he and the team would like to help you. But Jimmy, we've done another one, man. Thanks for another a bit of your time as we talked about estate planning.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Doug.
Enjoy that autumn season. You're more than welcome. And thank you, everybody, for listening to the Right Path to Retirement podcast. Again, get this over to your friends. Make sure, or your family members, that they know about this and they can start, well, planning the right path with Jimmy and his team. We'll have another episode coming your way very shortly, y'all. Thank you for listening.
Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Right Path Wealth Management. Right Path Wealth Management is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth, LLC, IPW, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Right Path Wealth Management are not subject to investment advisor requirements. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Right Path Wealth Management is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained by sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Right Path Wealth Management.